Today we're going to break down the top 15 highest CP Pokemon currently in Pokemon Go, the highest 15 CP Pokemon in the future of Pokemon Go, and answer the age-old question, is CP actually equal power in Pokemon Go? Okay, let's get into it with the current list of highest CP Pokemon in Pokemon Go. Now this first list here is not going to include Mega Pokemon because of course Mega Pokemon work different as regular Pokemon in which they're temporary. But we will have a list later including those. Starting at number 15, we have Nihilego with a max CP at level 50 as a 100% IV of 4,465. Now it's important to know these are all level 50. Technically all these CPs can be a little bit higher if you best buddy them to level 51. And do note all of these max CPs are that Pokemon at the highest powered up level as a perfect IV CP. Anything other than that and you will end up with a lower CP than what we're talking about. In the number 14 slot we have Garchomp with 4,479. Pretty accessible Pokemon there since it's had a calm day. Moving on to 13, Meloetta in the area form, 4,490. You would not expect for this little princess Pokemon to have such a high CP. Palkia is going to take the number 12 spot with a max CP of 4,512. Out of all the origin forms and altered forms of Palkia and Dialga, this is actually the lowest CP. Hoopa Unbound in the number 11 slot with a max CP of 4,530. Pretty high for that Pokemon, just had a raid day actually. In the number 10 slot, we're going to have a tie in between Dialga, Reshiram, and Zekrom, all maxing out at the same CP number of 4,565. Funny Dialga's in there, but Reshiram and Zekrom do have identical stats, meaning they will obviously tie in CP. Next up, 5 CP above that is Solgaleo and Lunala in the number 9 slot with a max CP of 4,570. Dusk and Dawnwing's Necrozma then take the next spot with a max CP of 4,623 CP, introducing of course our first fused Pokemon onto the list. And these things are obviously beasts. In the number 7 slot, we are going to see origin form of Dialga with a max CP of 4,624. Insanely high CP on that Pokemon. In the number 6 slot, we're going to have another tie between Groudon and Kyogre with a max CP of 4,652. Honestly, this is what I'm going to say, for Gen 3 Pokemon that have been around a while, these Pokemon are still competing in the top slot. And one thing you'll also start to notice, since attack weights a lot more towards CP, a lot of these top Pokemon here are going to be very, very attack weighted. Like origin form Palkia, which takes the number 5 slot with a max CP of 4,683. And of course, this one has an attack stat of 286, so it makes sense it has such a high CP. We then have what a lot of people think is the highest CP Pokemon in Pokemon Go, Mewtwo, but that's only the number 4, with a max CP of 4,724. Obviously, still insane for a max CP, but it is not the number 1. Because Regigigas, with its insane monstrous stats, is the number 3 highest CP Pokemon with a max CP of 4,913. Now, Regigigas is a Pokemon with insane stats, but in the main series games, it is nerfed by its ability. In Pokemon Go, it's nerfed by its moveset. So that's why you don't see this Pokemon that much around. It has insane stats and insane CP, but its moveset is garbage. In the number 2 slot, a Pokemon that honestly no one really expects to be up here above all the legendaries and was actually the max CP holder for a long time was Slacking. Yes, Slacking with a max CP of 5,010, the only Pokemon that could get a max CP over 5,000 for a while, is the number 2 spot holder. And this thing, again, got completely nerfed by its moveset. It has Yawn. It's terrible because it would be so broken if it had anything decent. But in the number 1 slot, a recently introduced Pokemon, the new number 1 CP Pokemon in Pokemon Go, Black and White Kyurem. With a max CP of 5,206, over 200 points above Slacking, this Pokemon is now the number 1 highest CP. Of course, it is a fused version of a Pokemon. It is still an absolute beast, both of them having the same CP, and that is the highest CP Pokemon in Pokemon Go, but technically not, because we do have Primal and Mega Pokemon in Pokemon Go, which hit CP numbers way above this. Let's go through the top 15. Okay, number 15 is Mega Alakazam with CP of 5,099, Mega Gardevoir in the number 14 with 5,101, and Mega Gallade in the number 13 slot with 5,112. All 3 of these Megas have a lower CP than a Black or White Kyurem, which is kind of insane to me, the fact that we have temporary Mega Pokemon with lower CP caps than permanent Pokemon. Nonetheless, all the following Pokemon have a way higher CP than Black and White Kyurem. In the number 12 slot, we see Mega Gyarados, max CP of 5,332. Mega Latias in the number 11 with 5,428. Mega Heracross in the number 10 slot, 5,443. Mega Metagross, which is our first Mega not in Pokemon Go, with a max CP of 5,552. Mega Latios is then up there with a max CP of 5,601. Do note, Mega Latios has a higher attack stat than Mega Latias, and that's why you're seeing it as a higher CP Pokemon than its Eon Duo. Mega Salamence is then in the number 7 slot with a max CP of 5,688. We then have Mega Tyranitar with the first Pokemon breaking over that 6,000 CP number with a max CP of 6,045. Mega Garchomp is next up, almost 100 CP above that with a max CP of 6,132. We then of course have the Mega Mewtwo's. Mega Mewtwo X having a max CP of 6,138 in the number 4 slot, and Mega Mewtwo Y, since it has a higher attack stat, having a max CP of 6,343 in the number 3 slot. And yes, you might be like, Mega Mewtwo is not going to be the highest max CP Pokemon in Pokemon Go once it gets released. And no, it is not. Because we actually have the highest CP Pokemon in Pokemon Go already in game. And that's unfortunately not going to be Mega Rayquaza. Mega Rayquaza has a max CP of 6,458, which is really, really high for a max CP, but it's not the number 1. Because the number 1 is actually a primal Pokemon. Primal Groudon and Kyogre tied with a max CP of 6,672. This is the highest max CP you can currently get in Pokemon Go. And if you've ever used these Pokemon, these things are absolutely busted. They're top counters all across the board. But how long will they actually hold these spots? Because looking to the future at different Pokemon we will get in Pokemon Go, there is one here that would take the top spot from these Pokemon. So let's go through the top 15 highest CP Pokemon in Pokemon Go, including future Pokemon. In the number 15, we have Pokemon already in Pokemon Go, Solgaleo and Lunala with a max CP of 4,570. Duskmane, Dawnwings, Necrozma next up, 4,623. Origin Form Dialga, 4,624. Regular Groudon and Kyogre, 4,652. And this is where at the 11th spot, we get a new max CP holder. That is Terrapagos Stellar Form. Now, I don't know if we're going to get these different forms of Terrapagos from the new Gen 9 games, but if we do, it would have a max CP of 4,655, which is very, very respectable. This will still be under Origin Form of Palkia with a max CP of 4,683 in the number 10 slot, but still very respectable. Mewtwo will then be in the number 9 slot now with a max CP of 4,724 because Calyrex in the Ice Rider form is going to take the number 8 slot with a max CP of 4,788. We could definitely see these Calyrex Pokemon coming to Pokemon Go now because especially they work as fusion type Pokemon like we've seen before with Kyurem and Necrozma. So these Pokemon could definitely take the top spots. Regigigas will keep the number 7 spot at a max CP of 4,913, but Eternatus will slot itself right in above it with a max CP of 5,007 CP. Eternatus is a very potential Pokemon for us to get very soon, especially because Dynamax and Gigantamax has been getting pushed. Slacking is next up with a max CP of 5,010, but here comes the top 4 new bad boys on the block. Zacian Crown Form is going to have a max CP of 5,029. This Pokemon is very, very attack weighted, and that's why you're seeing such a monstrous CP cap. But above that, there is still Pokemon stronger than it, with Calyrex Shadow Rider taking the number 3 slot with a max CP of 5,132. As you've noticed, none of this has been above the number 2 slot, Black and White Kyurem, which of course are in Pokemon Go right now. We all know it's max CP at 5,206. So it's really cool to see these Pokemon that are currently in Pokemon Go are still the number 2 highest CP Pokemon that will ever come to Pokemon Go. Unless, of course, we get new Pokemon. But in the number 1 slot, the highest max CP Pokemon we will ever see in Pokemon Go, if it ever does come, is going to be Eternatus Eternamax with a max CP of 9,255. Now, it's been told in the community this Pokemon will never come, especially because you actually can't even have this Pokemon or own this Pokemon in the main series Pokemon games. It's actually just a final boss you go ahead and battle. But Niantic has been doing a lot with Dynamax and Gigantamax, and if they ever decide to drop Eternatus Eternamax into Pokemon Go, it will have the highest CP ever, above everything else, not even close, almost near double our second highest, and will be the number 1 highest CP Pokemon. But with all this talk, does this actually matter? Why am I talking about the top 15 highest CP Pokemon in Pokemon Go? And should you care? Well, really the answer is actually no. CP doesn't matter in Pokemon Go, because what actually matters is your stats and your moveset. Is your attack stat good? Is your defense stat good? And what moves do you know? That is what makes or breaks a Pokemon in Pokemon Go. Now, of course, CP is a really good way to get a general gist and a general look at a Pokemon to see if it's powerful. But if we look at the Master League here, Palkia Origin Form, which is on our max CP list, is ranked number 1 in Black Kyurem, but Zygarde Complete Form, which doesn't even have that high of a max CP at 4,208, is still ranked number 3 because it has insane defense stats and it has an insane moveset. Solgaleo, which has a high CP, and a couple of these Pokemon were on there, but then in the number 8 slot, Rhyperior, not on our top list, Xerneas, Florges, Zekrom, technically Zekrom was on our list, Landorus. There are still Pokemon up here that are strong that don't have a high max CP. In the Grey League, you see this even more because the CP doesn't even matter as much, in which all these Pokemon that you're seeing here aren't even the highest CP Pokemon in Pokemon Go. Even if we look at raid attackers, like fire type raid attackers, the best raid attackers for the fire type, Mega Charizard Y and Mega Blaziken, are not even the top 15 highest CP Pokemon in Pokemon Go, and that's because they have the moveset of Blast Burn, which is way more important. So overall, CP can give you a good gauge in which if a Pokemon is going to be strong for the Master League or for raid attacking, but really it's more about their stats and their moveset that really makes or breaks a Pokemon. Look at Slacking, for example, an insane max CP, but got shafted with the moveset, so it's kind of trash. Guys, if you learned something from this video, watch the other 2 videos on screen. You'll enjoy those ones as well. And let me know what your highest CP Pokemon is in Pokemon Go and follow for more tips. Peace.